We want now to turn to a look at energy industries in Montana, and to do that we have the Director of the Energy and Natural Resource Research Program in our Bureau. Would you please welcome Terry Johnson.
I'm going to just jump in and talk about energy, the outlook for primarily focus in on oil, coal, natural gas, and a little bit about metals. So the first thing I want to just address is some of the major developments that have taken place during 2013. The very first one that I'd like to just briefly discuss is the U.S. Geological Survey just updated their assessment of the amount of recoverable reserves in the Bakken Formation. And back in 2008, their initial assessment was there was about 3.7 billion barrels of oil, recoverable oil, in that particular formation. And the formation includes Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and it also goes into Canada. But their assessment was strictly for the United States. Their revised assessment now includes what they call the Three Forks Formation, and it's doubled. So instead of 3.7 billion barrels, now we are at 7.4 billion barrels of recoverable reserves. From another major development that took place in 2013 was the announcement by NorthWestern Energy. Announced that they are filing with the Public Service Commission to purchase 11 hydro dams in Montana. And then the second issue that NorthWestern is, they're wrapping up the purchase of some natural gas properties in Montana. So they will have about 37% available resources to supply their customers with natural gas. A surprise that is taken place recently is natural gas improvements in Montana. What we've seen is an actual slowdown in the decline of production of natural gas in Montana. And in addition to that, what we've also seen is a rather dramatic uptick in the price of natural gas. In the first 9 months of 2012 to 2013, we've seen about a 45% increase in natural gas prices. And that's before the major cold snaps that have been hitting the Midwest and the eastern part of the United States. Another major development that has taken place is the CO2 injection process, where a company injects CO2 in old wells in Montana. The first one that's under operation right now is the Bell Creek field. Denbury is injecting CO2 to enhance the recovery from some of those old wells. Data right now is not sufficient to indicate whether it's going to make a difference, but definitely in the next probably 6 months we'll probably have some information to see how that's working out. The last two issues deal with birds in Montana. The first one is the wind farm litigation. Rimrock Wind Farm is currently being sued by San Diego Gas and Electric over an issue in the contract that specifically specifies that they are required to do certain things to protect eagles, bats, other types of birds. And at this point, Rimrock in turn is countersuing San Diego Gas and Electric for breach of contract. So that is currently in play. And then the last issue is the sage grouse issue. This is a significant issue from a standpoint of private landowners as well as oil and gas development in Montana. The issue there is that sage grouse may be listed based on Fish, Wildlife and Parks, or excuse me, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And if they are listed, then there's more than likely it's going to limit the amount of development on those lands that contain the sage grouse. So there's lots of happening in that particular issue too, and I believe the Governor's Advisory Council just wrapped up their meeting just I believe it was yesterday. So What I'd like to do now is take a look at a couple of industries in particular, and the first one is oil. And in this particular case, what I'm trying to illustrate is how the dynamics of oil production has changed and some of the issues that oil producers have had to face as we've proceeded through 2013. From the graphic, you can see that Texas is by far the largest oil producer in the U.S. at about 2.7 million barrels per day. A lot of that new production is coming from what we call the Eagle Ford formation in Texas. Now, the combined production from Montana and North Dakota is just over 1 million barrels a day, but you can see from the chart that North Dakota is producing by far the most. It won't be too much longer than that North Dakota will probably be producing 1 million barrels per day on their own. The issues that are one of the major issues that oil producers have been facing is the issue with transportation. How do you get the oil from the production site ultimately to market? And the traditional way of doing that, of course, has been through pipelines. And you'll notice in 2012, about 460,000 barrels were exported to the refineries based on that technique. Well, obviously, if 1 million barrels of oil is produced per day in Montana and North Dakota, 460,000 barrels per day on a pipeline is not adequate to achieve the transportation. What has happened just recently, it's been building over time, but we have seen a substantial amount of oil now being actually transported by rail. And this data goes through 2012, but based on some new information I got in 2013, about 2/3 of all oil production out of the Williston Basin will be actually transported by rail. Now, with this particular, what I call a bottleneck in terms of transportation, what has happened as producers did not have options to actually ship their oil, what they had to do is discount the prices in order to get it into the pipeline. This graphic shows you that differential between Montana price and West Texas price in the early stages and how it's changed over time. Now what we're seeing is that instead of a differential of anywhere from $12 to $20 per barrel, now that differential has come back to about $5 a barrel, which is very consistent with historical patterns. So definitely having rail availability to actually transport oil has made a big difference in prices. Now, on the flip side, even though oil producers in Montana and North Dakota have seen some relief from the issue of pipelines and rail, now the secondary issue is an oversupply of oil at refineries in Texas and Louisiana. And what we take a look at is the European Brent price, which is more of a global oil price. And if you take a look at the U.S. price and plot that against it, normally and historically, it has mirrored the Brent price fairly closely. Now what we have started to see is a deviation from that mirroring, and in the recent months, we're actually seeing a decline from the Brent price. What that means is that the refineries in Texas and in Louisiana are it's turned out to be a buyer's market. So now producers actually have to reduce their prices in order to get their product to those refineries. So that is the squeeze on the other side of the equation in terms of prices. Now, the other issue that oil companies have been dealing with is what I would call drilling rig efficiencies. And what we have noticed and what we have traditionally tried to track is the number of oil rigs in Montana and North Dakota as an indicator of what production may be looking like into the future. Well, from this graphic, you can see that the number of oil rigs in Montana and North Dakota has actually declined in the last several months. Now, if we take a look, though, one step further and look at the number of barrels produced based on a per rig basis, we're actually seeing an increase in that production. What that means that oil rigs now are becoming more efficient. And what I mean by that is oil rigs are utilizing technology called multi-pad drilling. Multi-pad drilling allows one oil rig to drill up to 5, even 10 different wells. They move from one well site to the other, but they don't have to tear down the well rig, reassemble it, and then drill again. They can literally move that one rig from site to site and drill multiple wells. So let's take a look at Montana in particular. And so what has happened in the last year in terms of production? So what we've taken a look at is the first 2 quarters of production in 2012 compared to the first 2 quarters in 2013. What we have seen is almost a 21% increase in the amount of production in Montana. And this, again, is a result of movement into the Bakken Formation, not only in Richland County, but also into Roosevelt County. And based on that movement, we're seeing new production coming off of that Bakken Formation, and some of the older wells are not producing as much. So definitely we're seeing a pretty significant improvement in terms of the amount of production. And then in addition to that, I show the prices that the producers are receiving, relatively stable over that period of time. So let's take a look at one more industry. This industry is the coal industry in Montana. Just quickly give you some idea of what's happened in this industry. I think the big surprise with coal is we're seeing about a 10% increase in production. And again, I'm measuring that 2 quarters of 12 to 2 quarters of 13. Substantial improvement in production, and I suspect a lot of you would not expect that occurring. Prices have remained relatively stable during that period also. So let's take a look at what is causing some of that change in production in Montana. This shows the data for 2007, and most of Montana's coal was used for domestic consumption, in other words, utility power generation, with about 1% being exported. Now, if you jump ahead to 2012, about 75% is being used for domestic consumption, but the other 25% is export markets. Now, I do need to note that this number could be somewhat soft in that once coal is sold to a broker, it's almost impossible to determine where that coal actually ends up being utilized. It could be shipped overseas, or it could be used for domestic consumption. In terms of headwinds, we've got a couple of issues there with headwinds for the coal sector. First one is EPA regulations. We've got 2 regulations currently in the works. The first one is dealing with new coal-fired plants and the carbon emissions. The comment period is currently underway, and I believe the date is March 10th when the comment period will end. And the second issue is the EPA will be issuing proposed standards for existing power plants in June. Couple of other issues: Pacific Northwest port facilities. It looks like that is years away, probably not until 2018 before, even if all the permits were achieved, before any coal could be exported through those facilities. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch upon, stock prices for major coal companies have taken a significant hit in the last year. We have some companies showing about a 90% decline in their stock prices. So in terms of the overall outlook for energy, at this point we're saying that we think coal is going to be relatively stable because there really isn't much of an opportunity to export the coal, and prices should stay relatively stable. With oil, we think that's going to increase, and of course it's because of drilling efficiencies and also because of the new transportation options. And then the natural gas, we're expecting it to increase as well, and that is primarily because of the pressure that's coming from the coal side in terms of environmental regulations. And minerals, we expect those to be down because of weak commodity prices. Final thing I just wanted to leave you with is natural resource and energy taxes contribute a significant amount of revenue to state and local government coffers. This gives you somewhat of a flavor of how much that is. If you look at the last 3 years, it's been relatively stable, and they contribute somewhere between 12 and 16% of total state taxes. So that concludes my comments and my outlook for the energy, and I'd be glad to take a question or two.
Questions, comments for Terry?
What I was wondering is, considering that there seems to be the refinery issue, are there plans in this state or nearby to build refineries?
That's a really good question, and in fact I should have mentioned that one of the options besides rail and pipeline is there's currently 3 refineries, proposed refineries, for the state of North Dakota. And one is under construction, I believe, right now, and the other 2 are in their planning stages. So those 3 refineries is a very good chance that we would have that as another option beyond rail and pipeline. Beyond that, there's definitely no other large refineries that I'm aware of in the Texas, Louisiana area.
Question here. Sherry.
Just one thing, how about hydropower in Montana? Is that having any kind of effect? And then technologies, one of the things we've heard is the technology of extracting the oil has been very important. Are we seeing any other innovative processes in technologies which will affect us? Coal, gas, anything?
From a standpoint of wind energy contributes more over time. I believe the amount of energy contributed by wind now is up to about 4%, so it is increasing. From a standpoint of technology, definitely in the area of drilling capabilities. That is relatively new technology. It hasn't been that long ago where you had one rig drill one well. But now when you have one rig that can drill multiple wells with laterals, horizontal laterals going off of those vertical wells, you increase your output significantly. So that's a good example of technology at play.
Thank you, Terry. Well, we recognize that there are things going on in local economies that are not always obvious to us from the economic statistics that we work with, and certainly economic statistics don't reveal all of the potential new developments. So we've turned to local expertise in each of our outlook cities to more fully develop the local area outlook. And in Missoula, we are very pleased to have with us the president and CEO of the Missoula Economic Partnership. Would you please welcome James Grunke?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, let me just thank Pat and his entire team. It is so beneficial to have the content that we've got to see this morning, and it is really rare. I've been in lots of other states, and I've never seen it done as well. And so it's really hats off, because I think it's just a great program, and I appreciate being a part of it. And I also not so much appreciate being the 9th or 10th PowerPoint speaker and one of the last obstacles between 400 people in lunch. So I have kept my PowerPoint extremely brief. I think there's only a handful of slides, and there's not one chart or table included. But where do we start? I mean, one of the things that we talked about, Pat, first off this morning is why is Missoula slower? Or Missoula is slower than the rest of the state, but why? I mean, we can't underscore losing an entire base industry does matter. But we see some good optimism and hopefulness coming out of that. So if we looked at the Bonner Mill site today, there's over 200 jobs that are related to activity that's happening in that mill site. 2 years ago, that didn't happen. So we're seeing some reclaiming. But there's some other things that are really kind of happening that are slowing down our economy. Hospital personnel cutbacks are going to slow some of our growth. University of Montana having some budget challenges is going to slow our growth. The construction industry, this chart says in 2006, generated $220 million of earnings in our community. It fell down to $180 million. So those are kind of the things that we're looking at are slowing us down, but there's actually a lot of optimism I think we can look about, and that's what I actually want to talk about today. The first is 2014 looks like it's going to be a tremendous year for commercial development. If we took the University of Montana, their authorization of $51 million in new construction, Missoula College, Gilkey Center, additions to the athletic complex, though that public investment is going to spur economic activity here. But we also have, I'm sorry that's a little small, but that's the Riverfront Triangle. That site has now been aggregated into about 9 acres of development. Instead of just talking about the old Fox cinema site, now it's the entire parcel of land, and having 9 acres available for development, commercial development in a downtown community is going to have great opportunity for us. Total build out, we should see about $150 million in new construction on that site in the coming years. We have the old sawmill district. We're going to see the first buildings coming out of the ground there in 2014. We're going to see some of the first time foreign investment is used as a catalyst for economic growth in Montana and in Missoula. And I know Leslie Weatherby here will be happy to take orders on condos. So see her after. But we're excited about seeing that. And the last one, and I apologize for the drawing, that's the South Crossing Shopping Center. That's a tired, for the lack of a better term, it was a tired piece of property. You know, when it finally closed, there was a little over 50 jobs that were on that entire parcel of property, and I don't mean to minimize the loss of that. But now with over $20 million of new investment, we're going to see 500 new jobs created on that piece of property. Cabela's alone, I learned from Wolf from the job service yesterday, anticipates when they're up and running 140 new jobs just on their parcel. So there are things that are happening. So it's not just commercial activity, but what are the things that happen with it? So we're excited about those kind of things. You know, the other thing that I want to talk about is I really think 2014 is going to be the year of the startup in Missoula. These are just a handful of companies that I selected, and there could be many other ones that we could talk about that are really interesting components of our community. QuantPost, and I will not fully explain what any of these do, so I apologize, but they have created an algorithm to put predictability in options trading, and that is going to service millions of people across the country from Missoula, Montana. Blackstone Launchpad. That's going to be formally announced on February 13th, but it's a new entrepreneurship program that at the University of Montana and Montana State that is going to give students the opportunity to look at entrepreneurship as a career. And those are things that change our path forward. Rocky Mountain Biologicals, that's a company that we should be all extremely proud of. So when you go have your cholesterol tested, the serum that it's tested on is only manufactured in 2 places in the whole world. One of them is Missoula, Montana, Rocky Mountain Biologicals. The FS is FilmSpur. That's creating an online film festival, and it's all going to be created in Missoula, Montana. The John Raffato Business Plan Competition. University of Montana is the home of the second oldest business plan competition in the United States. It's going to be the 25th year this year, anniversary this year. We're seeing great talent that's coming out of the things, and these are the things that are going to create entrepreneurship to move our community forward. I think one of the things that President Ingstrom discussed this morning was having Missoula identified as number 5 on the list of small cities in tech startups. And small cities is defined as cities under 250,000. And that's a good place for us to be, and we have a lot of room to grow. This chart is talking about how venture capital is being centralized, or where it's going. This is per 100,000. And you can see in the Northwest who's the biggest blue dot. It's coming here. We have some deals that will happen in the first quarter of 2014 that I think are going to grow that circle even bigger. So we have companies that are viable, that are attracting outside investment, and are going to be high growth opportunities for our community. You know, the other thing is, this came out of the Atlantic Journal. One of the things that happened to this is we began receiving calls from venture capital firms saying, what's going on up there? Do we need to come and be a part of what's happening there? So these things do matter. Generally, I always like to say, you know, if we're on the top of a list, it's because, you know, we're so exceptional and we deserve it. And if we're not on the list, it's because the methodology was wrong, or those other things. But these publications do matter. And then I think the last thing I really want to close on is also where we started today. Not all jobs are equal. What jobs are we looking at that have the high growth potential and high pay opportunities? And we think there's a tremendous opportunity in data analytics, and cybersecurity. It's one of the few things that geographic isolation of Montana is an advantage. And there's been a great team led by the university and the private sector and local government putting together the first cybersecurity lab at the University of Montana, putting together an online certification process for cybersecurity. The development of these programs, we have Blackfoot Telecommunications, who invested into Montech to have 1 gigabit service to any tenant there, because we want businesses that are growing and trying to be incubated to work on their business, not have costs that are detrimental to their growth. And then finally, we've been a founder of the Missoula Big Data Alliance, and that's trying to coalesce all these efforts together. So that is really kind of a snapshot of kind of some of the things that we're up to. If you want to grow your company, if you want to expand your company, you want to start a company, contact us. We'd love to hear from you. I have a tremendous team, Brigitte Freer, Melanie Brock, who are both here. If you have an idea, corner them. They're the real workers. I would just pass you to them, so just bypass me anyway. And so with that, thank you. Let me close on one thing. I've learned that no matter what I talk about, I'm going to be asked 2 questions. What are you doing about airfares? What's happening at the Merc? We're working on it. I don't know. Thank you.
I'm sure James would be happy to answer other questions as well. Questions or comments? He's got a good canned answer for all of the others he's anticipated too. Other questions?
They're ready to eat lunch.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Again, James. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a question.
There's a question right here, actually. I wanted to make a comment and ask a question. You mentioned Blackfoot and their data. I think the crowd should be aware there's another carrier in northwestern Montana as well, and that's my company, Ronan Telephone and Montana West. We've been implementing over the last 3 years in an alliance with the Health Information Exchange Montana, about a $25 million fiber optic network stretching from Missoula to Whitefish that has a number of links in Missoula, plus we are the owner of the Gigapop in Missoula that's going to serve this part of the state. So I'm optimistic about competition for telecom services in Missoula and western Montana, and I'm also optimistic about the economic development possibilities there. So thank you.
Thanks, James, for the good words and the good work that the Economic Partnership does for the community here. We all appreciate it and look forward to hearing about successes coming up. As we begin, there are a number of introductions that I would like to make. First of all, I would like to introduce some people from the University of Montana that we're very proud to have here with us, happy to have with us. First of all, I'd like to introduce Perry Brown, the Provost of the University of Montana. And we had with us earlier Scott Wittenberg, our Vice President for Research and Creative Activities. Scott, are you still with us? Well, thank you for attending the program. The President of the University of Montana again, Roy Sangstrom. Royce, thank you. Thanks for your words and being here with us. I'd also like to introduce Teresa Branch, our Vice President for Student Affairs. Thank you, Teresa. And of course, the Dean of our School of Business Administration, Larry Gianforte. Larry, thank you. I have a couple of our advisory board members that I would like to introduce. First of all, Sue LaRue, a Vice President with First Interstate. Sue, are you here? Thank you. Thank you for your service on our advisory board and your sponsorship. Thanks. And also James Grunke again is on our advisory board. James, once again, thank you for your service on our advisory board. Some additional introductions that I would like to make. We have with us Vicki Judd from NorthWestern Energy, again our principal sponsor. Vicki, are you here? Vicki. Thank you. Vicki is Director of Community Relations in Missoula. Thank you for being here, and thanks for the sponsorship. And Karen Murphy from the Montana Health Co-op, the Marketing Director. Karen, are you here? Thank you, Karen. Now, I would like to introduce members of our Bureau of Business and Economic Research staff that you have not met on our program. And I would like to begin with those folks who have been most heavily involved in the development of our program, and in particular, Bob Campbell, who handled a lot of the AV stuff today. There he is. Two people that have, not to slight anyone, but have probably had the most to do with the program and the publications related to it. First of all, our Director of Marketing, Christina Henderson, who also helped organize and coordinate these. And then Shannon Furness, our Communications Director. Shannon, excellent, who lived and died to put together the Outlook booklets and the PowerPoint slides and get them to you in time for the programs. Also, Deborah Simmons, our office manager, was, to say the least, heavily involved in our Outlook seminars. And Perry Taylor helped with a great deal with registration and organizing registration. So thank you. Now, others, I'd like to introduce two folks that are involved in our survey research department, and one of whom is a senior economist with us, Jim Sylvester. And, Jim, yeah, thank you, and John Baldwin. And finally, our Kids Counts folks, Tala Dillon and Jennifer Calder, both work with our Kids Count program. And then, least but not last, the foresters on our staff that are with us today. Chelsea McIver, who is a research associate and forester. And Chelsea, thank you. And Colin Sorensen, who is an economist on our forestry staff. Now, did I get everyone? Thank you. Good? Excellent. We have quite a staff, and they do great work, so thanks to them. Now, we'd like once again to turn to the theme of the program today, creating high-paying jobs in Montana. And we have a keynote speaker who has developed businesses that have produced literally hundreds of good-paying jobs in Montana. And in addition to that, he feels strongly that what he's done can be replicated throughout the state, and he's going to tell us about that. And of course, all of us have a keen interest in this, and certainly Montana's electric and gas utilities have a keen interest in economic growth. Our state's largest investor-owned utility and our Outlook seminar's major sponsor, NorthWestern Energy, has initiated some recent developments designed to place that utility in a stronger position to handle new growth. So to give us a few remarks on the acquisition of PP&L's hydro facilities, and then to introduce our keynote speaker, would you please welcome the President and CEO of NorthWestern Energy, Mr. Bob Rowe.
Good afternoon. I'm very, very happy to be here and excited to be able to introduce Greg as well. Very much appreciated you recognizing Vicki. She's a treasure to the company. She's one of only 2 employees I'm actually allowed by Human Resources to hug. Vicki and I go back a long way, and it's just a treat to be able to work with her. My wife and I lived in Missoula for many years. Today is the kind of day that really made us love Missoula. You put on the skis and go up and down the river and across campus. It's just wonderful. It's also the kind of day when I hope everyone really does appreciate what the people that I work with, the hundreds of people who are actually out in the field providing gas and electric service every day, are dealing with. Crews were out early this morning, as they always are, from Hamilton all the way to the Flathead. And if it weren't for the work that they do, well, we wouldn't be having this meeting, obviously. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I am going to say just a little bit about the company. Years before I worked for NorthWestern Energy, and times were pretty bleak, obviously, in terms of what was happening in the utility area in Montana, and we all remember and lived through that. I asked myself, others asked themselves, what do you want in your utility? And the answer that I came up with, that I think most people would agree on, is you want a company that's financially sound, focused on being a utility, focused on the communities that it serves, and ultimately all of that to be focused on the customer. And that is very much the kind of company that the 1,500 to 1,600 people that I work with are all dedicated to building in Nebraska, South Dakota, and with the great majority of our operation in Montana. We start with an emphasis on high-quality corporate governance, and that has been consistently recognized. 3rd year in a row, we're one of the 100 most trustworthy companies, publicly traded companies in the United States, according to Forbes magazine. Our ethics program in the last few months, corporate ethics program, was recognized, given a grade of A by an affiliate of the New York Stock Exchange, top 2% of all utilities that participated. Worked very hard on building trust, engaging with our constituents, and planning for the future. Core part of planning for the future is our ongoing programmatic approach to investing in our basic everyday gas and electric distribution system. Tens of thousands of miles in Montana that touches probably most of your homes. One of the most important things we do. Same kind of attention to the transmission system, same kind of attention to the back office systems, technology, human resources, organizational development, dealing with aging workforce issues, really trying to build the kind of system and the kind of workforce and the kind of culture that as customers, I think all of us expect. The headlines, of course, have been around supply. I do want to point out that in addition to rebuilding a supply portfolio, we have been building a portfolio of natural gas, kind of the traditional gas assets, generally up adjacent to our gathering and storage system in the Havre area. We've made 3 acquisitions now. Those are long life acquisitions with predictable depreciation rates to provide our customers some stability, because you will be paying, I will be paying as a customer, prices based on the cost of production, not based on what's going on in the market. Now, the expectation is gas markets stay stable, stay low for a long time, but we've all been reading in the newspaper what's happened with natural gas prices here recently with the spike associated with weather. So we're not trying to beat the market, but we're trying to take advantage of the market to provide that stability and to move back much more towards a regulated operation. On the supply side, I think probably everyone in the room agrees that deregulation and ultimately the sale of the plants in Montana was, I think, I thought at the time, the biggest public policy tragedy probably in our lifetimes. No one thought it would be possible to reverse course. We have, in fact, been able to do that in Montana. Starting in 2008, the only non-regulated resource, probably the only non-regulated asset of any kind that we owned in Montana was our interest in Colstrip 4. That has been returned, rededicated to serve our customers. That provides the kind of the stability, the voltage support, the baseload power that we need both to serve our customers and to maintain stability on the transmission system. And we built Dave Gates Generating Station. That's a regulating resource. Really, it's more of a transmission resource than a supply resource, keeping the system in balance and allowing us to integrate intermittent and renewable resources. We've had great success in the renewable area, and with the challenges there, we now we have actually a lot of wind under contract. We'll be meeting the state renewable portfolio standard out through the end of the next decade, and have been able to integrate that resource. Then, most excitingly, the opportunity to acquire the hydro assets in 2 drainages, multiple facilities that were built to match the transmission system, to match the distribution needs of our Montana customers. Nobody thought that opportunity was going to exist. We were able to bring that forward. With those assets, we'll actually have a perfect match between the resources we have dedicated to serve our Montana customers and our light load requirements. Have still be exposed to heavy load and peak requirements, but a huge step forward. Help us deal with fuel risk. Other companies are going much more heavily to gas. We have some gas, but you have to manage the fuel risk. Help us deal with the risk of future environmental regulation, and particularly help us deal with the risks of costs of compliance at thermal plants, and help us deal with what's happening in the Western power market over the next several decades as plants from San Onofre in California, the nuclear plant, to Boardman, the coal plant, to other facilities age and are shut down, will be able to step out for the customers that we provide the power as well as the T&D to, step out of the risks of that market. So tremendous opportunity. We're very excited about it. Filed our case at the Public Service Commission on December 20th, 5,500 pages. We've answered several thousand pages of material in response to data requests so far. There will be a hearing, we hope, in July, and the Commission will make its decision by fall. We think this is good for customers, fundamentally, good for the company. Because we are financially sound, because we are utility focused, it's something that we can do, and it will actually strengthen our ability to invest in our other utility operations. We heard last night after the market closed, Moody's has actually upgraded us, so we've had a series of credit upgrades, which is very exciting, very important for a capital-intensive industry, and specifically for this company. So lots of things that we are very, very happy about, and truly none more important than the work that our employees are doing every day in our Missoula division, all across Montana, all across the company. They get more excited about customer service, keeping people in power, restoring their service, gas or electric, than anything else. So that's a very quick report on what's happening at NorthWestern, and people are working hard and I think really believe in what they're doing. When James talked about the exciting opportunities that Missoula has in terms of entrepreneurialism, and particularly in the tech area, I was thinking, my gosh, what an incredibly good introduction to what Greg is about to speak to. I think you all know or know of Greg Gianforte. Big announcement when his company was acquired by Oracle in 2012. A lot of us assumed, well, great, good for Greg, everyone's very happy. He's going to be off on an island in the Caribbean and we will never see him again. And today, not a bad idea. But in fact, what's happened is we have seen more of Greg. Greg has been more active, perhaps, than ever before. The company he founded has continued to do incredibly well in the Bozeman area. It is really a great part of the Oracle family, and so he started something on a good foundation. It has continued to grow. Greg will mention a little bit about housing prices in the Bozeman area, but he gets some credit for creating real wealth and positive growth in that community. Greg has both a bachelor's and a master's degree from the Stevens Institute of Technology. His first job in industry was at Bell Labs, and I hope most of you remember Bell Labs, a storied research development institution, really unique in the private sector. And you had to be the best of the best of the best to work at Bell Labs. Well, Greg worked there, and he met his wife there in the cafeteria after they'd both given blood, and maybe her judgment or vision were impaired. But a quarter of a century later, as he will tell you, they are still a very happy couple and proud parents of four great kids. Greg is a serial entrepreneur, and that can mean one of two things. It can mean you try a lot of things and none of them work out, or you start a lot of things and they do well. And Greg is the latter kind. He's had a series of great successes in business, doing things that were compelling to customers and really helping to create strong, healthy businesses. Both before and since leaving RightNow and Oracle, Greg has been a tremendous contributor to the community. He and his wife and his family are dedicated to public service, particularly thrilled about supporting entrepreneurism, and they give of their time and share their success very, very generously. And he will make an offer as part of his presentation that I hope some in the room will accept. A couple of quotes that really sum up, I think, how Greg views his mission now. First, he believes that from those to whom much is given, much is expected. And he very much walks the talk on that. And secondly, the purpose of work is to serve others. And again, that I think really embodies the approach he's taking to his life at this point. So, based on all of that, he believes that RightNow's success can be learned from and can be replicated. I agree with both of those propositions, and please welcome me in joining Greg Gianforte.
Hello. It is my pleasure to be here with you today. It's really an honor to be able to address you over lunch here. First, I have to give a disclaimer. I am not an economist, but I do have a couple of charts. I am an engineer, and do you know how you tell the difference between an extroverted engineer and an introverted engineer? The extroverted engineer looks at your shoes when he's talking to you. So I have a question for you. How many of those of you that are parents, how many of you have children that no longer live in the state of Montana? Just by a show of hands. Okay. Just look around the room for a second. Hold your hands up for a second. Yeah, it's a lot. I have a son in Seattle. Wish he was back here. But that's really what I want to talk to you about, is how do we raise the average wage so that our children have opportunities to live here, earn a decent living, and raise their families here. But first, let me introduce myself. Bob did a great job. This is my family, my wife of 26 years and our 4 children. We have raised our kids here in Montana. We've lived in Bozeman for almost the last 20 years. And I'm pleased to say our daughter, who is the last one, we just found out this week, she is a U.S. presidential scholar candidate, which is a great deal. Of course, she's also a National Merit semifinalist. But the thing I want to share with you, what dad wouldn't be proud of their kids, but all 4 of our kids were U.S. presidential scholar candidates and National Merit semifinalists. And I'm going to talk a little later about education and maybe challenge some of the things that you may have become accustomed to. Better is possible in education, and I want to share some observations with you. But first, my wife is also an engineer. As was mentioned, we met at Bell Labs. We when we came to Montana, we saw a tremendous opportunity, and we believe, RightNow is my 5th software startup, and I believe that the internet removed geography as a constraint in where you locate a business. And I have to say, when we first came to Bozeman and we announced that we were going to start a global software company, there were an awful lot of people that said, you can't do that here. And they listed a bunch of reasons. They said, well, there's no capital here. There's no money to fund the business. They said, you don't have the travel that you need. There's not enough airline service. They said, you won't be able to hire the right people here. There were a whole list of reasons why they said we could not, bandwidth. There wasn't enough bandwidth. Well, I'm really glad we didn't listen to them. And we went and did it anyway. So over 15 years that we ran the business, this business that Susan and I started in an extra bedroom of the house, we grew to an organization that had 1,100 employees, most of which were in Bozeman, more than half. And our average wage in Bozeman was $86,000 a year. That was our Montana wage, because we had to hire on a national level. And to attract national talent, we had to pay a national wage. And over that 15 years, if you just look at the wages that we paid our employees, and then you look at the ripple effect from those wages in the economy, and an economist will tell us that typically a dollar introduced into a community bounces around 5 to 7 times before it settles. So the wages we paid in Bozeman over 15 years resulted in about $5 billion of economic value created in the Gallatin Valley. So it was significant. And people will say to me now, it's like deja vu a little bit. Well, that's fine for Bozeman, but that can't happen in our community. And that's part of the message of hope I want to bring to you, that with the internet, there's no reason why we can't have good paying jobs in every community in Montana if we just set our minds to it and stop listening to some of the cynics who tell us it's not possible. So this is the problem. This chart shows average wages by state. That's Montana over on the right. We're 49th in the country, just ahead of Mississippi. And this is the problem. Since we've had this great success, and we're incredibly blessed at RightNow, I've turned my attention to work on this problem over the next, I don't know how many decades it's going to take. But let's lift ourselves up out of this nearly last place position. It started with RightNow. I mentioned we did this in an extra bedroom of our house. People all say, well, there's no capital. Well, we funded RightNow at the beginning with less than $50,000. And we were cash flow positive from day one. And we doubled revenue and the number of employees every 90 days for 2.5 years with no outside capital. I'm a big advocate of bootstrapping businesses. Some businesses do need outside capital, but I think most usually raising money is an excuse for not thinking about the business hard enough and kind of figuring out some of the hard stuff. I have to say, I'm incredibly proud of what our Montana employees did. There was one guy, he was a ranch kid out of Dillon, that he was really talented, and we shipped him off to London, England to do a big software install for British Telecom. And it was a awful political environment. The software was complex, and he just took that Montana get her done attitude, ignored the politics, and got it done. And he wore his cowboy boots around London, and the gals kind of liked that. But the business liked even more the fact that he was just kind of getting the work done. And we found over and over again that the Montana work ethic was an incredible competitive advantage for us. And previously I've run businesses in Silicon Valley and back in the New York area. I'd put the Montana worker up against anybody in terms of their ability to solve problems and just get it done. About 45%, 43% to be exact, of our employees in Bozeman were either U of M or MSU grads. And we did a lot to bring these kids back home. We had billboards, I'll show you some pictures later, on 191 between the airport and Big Sky that said, we had a website entitled www.iloveithere.com. And that was our recruiting website. We'd get the alumni list from MSU and mail all of the computer science graduates for the last 10 years a postcard in the summer that had someone backpacking on it, and it would say, "Come home to Montana." And we'd mail a similar postcard in the winter with someone skiing on it saying, "Come home to Montana." We couldn't get enough graduates out of MSU, out of the university system to fulfill all our needs, so we had to go back and kind of troll through the alumni base to get more employees, and we were very successful in doing that. Just some stats. What did we do? We were a software company. We built software for large consumer businesses. So our clients were people like Cabela's, Nikon, Nike. We did about 10% of our business was with the federal government. So we ran the websites for portions of the websites for Medicare and Social Security Administration, TSA, FEMA, and many others. And essentially what we did, if you go on to Travelocity or Orbitz or Expedia, and on the home page there's the button that says click here for support. Let's say you're going on a trip and you're trying to figure out how many bags you can check, or do I need a shot if I'm going overseas, or do I need a visa? Well, the knowledge base that you search to find answers under that support button, and then all of the software, if you have to make a request, that reads those requests and figures out what language it's written in so we can route it to an agent who has that language skill. And it also reads your emails and figures out how angry you are so we can also route that appropriately, depending. Back to the software that actually is on the desktop of the agent in the call center. So these are big software systems. We ran the whole, all the call centers for the U.S. Air Force for all the personnel inquiries related to promotions and field upgrades and retirements and all this sort of stuff. So that's what we did, and we did it all from Bozeman, and now that's part of Oracle. And I'm very pleased, of the 1,100 employees we had, every single employee that wanted the job got a job when we made the transition. And Oracle continues to hire in Bozeman. In fact, my former CIO now runs all of the cloud operations for Oracle on a global basis. And he went from having about 100 people in his organization. Now I think he's got close to 600 people in his organization. And they're not all in Bozeman, but he's headquartered in Bozeman, and many of his staff are there. So it's been a good opportunity for people to further their careers. And in addition, not everybody stayed. We had a number of people leave the company. The good news is I know now that there's been between 12 and 24 new businesses started in Bozeman by former RightNow employees. So that'll be the next wave of innovation and job hiring that can occur. And we see this in many communities. When there's an anchor company, it tends to spin off other businesses. So just reviewing the data, I'm really proud of this revenue chart. You can see we grew pretty well each year. So sometimes we had to lean out the window to change the flat tire while we were driving down the road. It was going so fast. But it was exciting. We have 14 years of revenue growth. Again, I mentioned self-funded, cash flow positive, 1,100 average wage. We were Bozeman's largest commercial employer, probably one of the top employers in the state, and the only publicly traded technology company in the state when we ultimately, Oracle ended up purchasing us. I'm also proud of the fact that in the end, this was the highest, this is all public record now, but we had a 5-year relationship with Oracle, and most of it was us doing the Heisman to them. In the end, though, they've done 140 acquisitions. For our shareholders, we ended up getting the highest revenue multiple valuation of any acquisition Oracle's ever done in their history, and it was in Montana. They could have bought a company down in the Bay Area, but we had something that was unique. And they saw the value in that, and that's what Montana employees can create. Pat mentioned earlier that we were solely responsible for incomes going down in 2012 in Gallatin County. I could say that I think this is an important part of high tech. We gave about 20% of the equity to our employees as incentives, because we wanted every single employee in the early days to be an owner in the business. If those employees had kept all of that stock until the sale, which it was their right to sell it or keep it, but that ended up being worth something between $300 and $400 million. Right? So why did the bubble move to the left in 2013? Because they all exercised their stock options in 2012. That's just the color on that. So people thought we were a little nuts. I had one guy tell me he deleted my name from his contact list when he heard I moved to Montana. Ultimately, we did raise a little venture capital later on. We raised $32 million in venture capital. We only sold 20% of the business. He ended up flying to Bozeman every 90 days for board meetings. So he had to eat a little crow in the end. These are some creative that we use to promote the business, mostly from a recruitment perspective. In the upper right, this is an ad we ran in the MSU alumni newsletter. A picture of our congressman there who ran our Asian operations for us, Steve Daines, and our CFO and Chief Operating Officer, Susan Karstensen. This creative on the upper left, great experiences start with great people. That's one of the billboards that we put along 191 going down to Big Sky. And then our Cowboys Ride code, it's just an example of an ad, another ad. I think we ran this in the Delta Airlines magazine so we could catch people flying in and out of Bozeman. So my thesis was presented earlier in Bob's introduction. I believe that every single community in the state can participate in what we experienced at RightNow Technologies. The internet truly removes geography as a constraint. And just imagine with me for a second, if we had 25 more RightNow Technologies in the state, that would create 15,000 high-paying jobs, and over a 15-year period, put about $120 billion into the economy. If we can get focused on this and execute on it. Now, some of you are probably thinking, oh, well, that's well and good for you techies, but what about us accountants or marketing people? And it's kind of interesting. At RightNow, or any business, people assume that technology businesses only employ technology people. And nothing really could be further from the truth. At RightNow Technologies, 10% of our expenses were spent on research and development. The other 90% were accountants, salespeople, we hired some lawyers. So it was everybody else. So high tech creates jobs for all stripes of people. Now you may say, well, that's all well and good, but what about the rest of the economy? Well, I mentioned this ripple effect. The beauty of high tech is we didn't really have any customers in the state of Montana. So all these dollars were coming in from outside, and it was making our pie bigger so that everybody got a bigger slice. So if we paid an employee and they bought a new house, and that creates construction jobs, and then those construction workers take their families out to dinner, and that creates restaurant jobs, and on, 5 to 7 times before the dollars settle. And I think if we want to raise the average wage in the state, we got to make the pie bigger, and we're only going to do that if we bring more money in from outside. And I have a particular thought here that I want to share with you, and that is, if we want to improve the average wage in the state, I'm an engineer, so if that's the problem statement, my thesis is we better create jobs in industries that have high-paying jobs. It's not a huge leap. So let's look at the data. Pat presented some of this earlier today. You can see this is data. I kind of summarized it a little bit into larger buckets. Natural resources is at the top. Those are the highest paying jobs on a national level. But if we want to create jobs in every single community in the state, natural resources is not the solution, because not every community is blessed with natural resources. So number 2 is high tech. And again, we were at 86,000. This is a national number, which is 94, so we were very close to the national number. And then manufacturing. You'll also see 2 of our backbone industries here in the state, tourism and agriculture, which are fantastic. They're part of our legacy. They're tremendous industries. We have to face the fact they don't create high-paying jobs. You see where they are on the chart. So my thesis is, if we want to create high-paying jobs in every community across the state, we only have one option. It's high-tech and high-tech manufacturing. All right? So that's where I'm focused. And to do that, as I've thought about this problem, I think there's 2 things we need to focus on. One is entrepreneurs, and secondly is our education system. So I want to talk to you for a few minutes about each of those and kind of what I've been up to. So first, entrepreneurs. I started a group called the Bozeman Technology Incubator. Our URL is bozeman.com. That's the website. And in this last year, I've been very fortunate to do about 120 individual mentoring sessions. I do these free of charge. And if you have a high-tech or high-tech manufacturing business and you want some advice, it's worth what you pay for it. But I'm happy to give you some free advice. I probably do 5 to 6 of these sessions a week, and I only meet with Montana entrepreneurs, and the goal is to give back and help these businesses grow more quickly. Some of these businesses are starting to go. I had a guy call me a year ago, and he was struggling. Pieces weren't coming together. I met with him 6 times over the course of the last year. He just won his first big contract, and he's kind of off to the races. And he's just hired 3 new employees, and my estimation, I think the opportunity he has is probably as big as the one we had at RightNow Technology. So that's very exciting. We need to find these sparks in each one of our community. My wife and I funded a microloan program called Bootstrap Montana. This is run by the business school at Montana State. We've done 3 or 4 dozen microloans. These are zero-interest loans for rural entrepreneurs around the state. And we get the students involved at the business school in reviewing these loans. And if anybody here has interest, we've done an amazing amount with just $100,000, because we loan out $2,000, they go do something, and then they pay it back. And then we loan it out to somebody else. So if anybody has interest in this, it's a tax-deductible contribution to the MSU Foundation earmarked for Bootstrap Montana. I had one guy, an outfitter, who ran horseback trips in Yellowstone Park. And he didn't have as much business as he wanted. So we loaned him $2,000, loaded up his pickup truck, drove to San Jose, California, did a show for 3 days, signed like $30,000 worth of trips, came back to Montana and paid the loan back 30 days later. So this is kind of like really easy stuff. Why wouldn't we do this? We would like, if we had a couple $100,000 more, we could do a lot more loans, and we're excited about getting the kids involved. I've also authored a book called Bootstrap Your Business. I've had the pleasure of lecturing at a lot of the top business schools, including University of Montana. But my ideas are a little different than what they teach in business school, and I've never really been invited back any of these places. One other thing we're doing related to supporting entrepreneurs in the state is we're starting a high-tech alliance, which will be an industry group of high-tech and high-tech manufacturing firms that gives us a voice collectively across the state so we can advocate and do professional development. If any of you are running a high-tech or high-tech manufacturing business, I'd love to get your card, and we'll make sure we get you invited to the first meeting. So, education. I have to offer a caveat here at the beginning. Talking about K through 12 education is a little like grabbing onto the third rail. But I think if we're going to be pragmatic about moving the ball forward, we've got to look at some facts about what we have going on here in Montana, whether or not we're doing the right things to prepare our kids for these jobs of the future. I want to share a couple statistics. On the left, I mentioned we had about 100 jobs, 100 applicants for every job we opened up at RightNow Technologies. 99 were underqualified. And it kind of broke my heart because these kids just didn't have the skills or the experience. So we can do better. If you look at, in Montana, our high school dropout rate amongst low-income kids is 29%. So 29% of all the kids in the state from low-income families don't graduate from high school. This condemns these kids to a life of poverty. Because without at least a high school degree, it's hard to get anywhere else. And of the kids that do graduate from high school and take the ACT test, 71% of Montana kids are not proficient in either reading, writing, math, or science. One of those 4, or multiple ones. So without being too colorful, I just want to say better is possible. We can do better than this. One of the things we observed as well, computer science graduates are the seed corn for high tech. In the work I do with entrepreneurs, and we launched, I shared some of this data previously at the Job Summit back in September, I believe the state is creating right now between 400 and 500 jobs each year for entry-level computer scientists. And these jobs are good jobs. The average wage is $45,000 to $85,000 a year right out of school in Montana. This is not national, this is in Montana. I know my son just graduated from Montana State University with a computer science degree in December. He had 2 job offers. As a dad, I can say I don't think he worked very hard at trying to find those jobs. But he got 2 job offers, and they were in that salary range, right? So the jobs exist. And unfortunately, we don't have enough kids going into computer science. So the total output of U of M, Montana State, and Montana Tech last year was 40 for 400 jobs. So this is why we launched a new program called Code Montana. And we launched this at the Job Summit, the Baucus Job Summit back in September. And what Code Montana is an online digital curriculum that mirrors the Stanford first semester computer programming course. But it's written for high school students. And we made this curriculum available free of charge to all high school students in the state. And we set a lofty goal of getting 1,000 kids in the program. And I'm here today, I can tell you, we have over 950 kids in the program already. And since September, they've completed 26,000 software development exercises, which is tremendous. It's just been fantastic. I had a chance, I got an email from a STEM teacher over in Reed Point. She emailed me, she had some questions about the program. So I emailed her back, and an hour later she emails me back and goes, well, I signed the whole high school up. Well, actually she signed up about half the high school. There were 35 kids in the high school, 15 were in the program. About 2 weeks later I emailed her and I said, so how are you making out with the program? She said, well, I have this one student that's just really taken off. And his name is Lucas. And I was driving to Billings for something, so I said, can I stop in and meet Lucas? So I went to Reed Point, and Lucas comes out to see me, and we're chatting, and I said, had you ever written a line of code before? He says, no, I never had. I love it. I love Code Montana. He was enthusiastic. And I said, so what grade are you in? He said, well, I'm a senior. And what are you going to do next year? He says, I'm going to University of Montana to study computer science. And that's what this program's about, is to help kids open up brighter futures so they can participate. Too many of our kids were shipping out of state. We've got the jobs here. If we match the career paths with the jobs, it's good for our families, it's good for our state, it's good for the average wage. So the other thing that was kind of humorous, we launched this program about the same time Obamacare got launched. And in the first 6 weeks, we had 4 times more signups than Obamacare did in the state. So here's a map of the communities that have Code Montana kids in them. It's really, it maps almost identically to population density across the state. So this is not isolated to Bozeman. And those kids that are up in the Northeast or Northwest or Southeast, they're getting introduced to computer science. Hopefully, they'll come to University of Montana, Montana Tech, or Montana State, study computer science, and then fill some of these open jobs we have here in the state. That's the goal. The last thing I want to talk about is ACE. ACE is a program, this whole issue of getting kids into the right environment for them, I think is critically important in K through 12 education. We found ACE in Denver. It's a program that's been run there for 15 years. We were so impressed. They had taken inner city, and our graduation rates aren't as bad as Denver's. Denver only graduates 51% of their kids from high school in inner city Denver. The ACE program over 15 years has taken that number from 51% to 92% by providing $2,000 a year scholarships to low-income kids so that their parents had the financial wherewithal to pick a different option for their kids. We launched this program in Montana a year ago. The first year we did 500 scholarships across the state. We have 50 private schools participating with us in the program. I had one call from an administrator recently since the program's been launched. Their enrollment's doubled in the school. And the basic premise is that we know this as parents. No two children are created the same. In every area of our life, we have choice in education. What ACE is about, and people with means have choice. We can pick any school we want. Our kids went to a private school. But low-income kids don't. And the graduation problem is much more acute with lower-income families. ACE is a program. The average tuition for a private school in the state of Montana is about $5,000 a year. So a $2,000 scholarship and maybe $1,000 kicked in from the school makes that tuition affordable for a lower income family. They still have to sacrifice. They're still writing a check. This year, I was very fortunate. We have had a great support. Jeff Gamble, the former president of MSU, is on my board. Craig Barrett from Intel. We've had Jim Scott from First Interstate's on our ACE board. We've had great support from across the board, education and business. Ray Thompson from the Flathead. And then this past fall, a bunch of business people came alongside us. We raised another $2.2 million to provide more scholarships this year. So we've already know we're going to be at 700 scholarships in the fall, and it's just great to see the impact it's having on these kids' lives. So just to wrap it up, I'd say this experience we had at RightNow that brought $5 billion into the Gallatin County is repeatable. And if we do that, we can raise the state wage. And I think there's really three things we have to do to make this happen. Number one, I think we've got to focus on high-tech and high-tech manufacturing as a means to an end. Those are the jobs that we can create because the internet removes geography and we can drive jobs in every community. Secondly, we got to focus on the entrepreneurs. These are business. We're not going to get economic development and get some company to move here from someplace else, which has been kind of the holy grail of economic development for a long time. These businesses could be started here by Montanans. And thirdly, we got to look at our education. So we're producing kids that have the skills to participate in these high-tech jobs. I've summarized all of this in a website that just went live today. I'd love to get your feedback on it. The website is entitled bettermontanajobs.com. And it kind of goes into more detail than what I've been able to share with you today. But again, I'd love to have you take a look at that, review it, and send me your feedback. This is a problem worth working on it, and I'd love to work on it with you. So thank you very much.
Greg would be happy to answer questions, take comments. Yes.
I mean, for many people, they probably understand some of the language you take for granted. And I understand IT, but could you tell me more what IT manufacturing jobs is?
Okay, yeah, so the question is what is high-tech manufacturing? Really simply, there's like two kinds of manufacturing. If we were making garments or assembling widgets, that would not be high-tech. High-tech manufacturing is where the people doing the manufacturing have advanced skills. It might be welding, it could be machining, it could be chemistry, it could be a lot of different things. Like I was with a guy recently, a business owner from Lewistown. He's got 80 employees there, and they do steel fabrication. They're actually fabricating I-beams that get shipped and then assembled into skyscrapers. His average wage is $55,000 to $65,000 a year. His biggest impediment to growth is he can't hire enough people. So I would define high-tech manufacturing as a company that's producing a good or service where technology is involved in such a way that they need skilled labor in order to actually produce the product or service. Yeah.
Are there other questions or comments for Greg? Yes.
I was curious, you mentioned that your company spends 10% of their annual budget, I presume, on R&D. What level do you think, I'm always arguing that our state and so forth, we need to spend more money on R&D. How much should that be for Montana?
At the state level?
At the state level, both public and private. Now, of course, there's private R&D with a company such as yours, but then there's also public R&D where we have funding of research and development out of our state funds and so forth and so on.
Yeah, I am not a big fan of state funding of research and development for the following reason. It forces a government institution to pick winners and losers, and they're usually not very good at it. We end up with Solantra kind of situations where we're trying to put dollars in a certain place. Maybe that's not a popular thing to say in an environment like this, but we did our own funding. I know in software, early stage, the percentage is a lot higher. When you're starting a business, it might be 50 or 80% of expenses. If you look at the P&L statements for technology companies, typically R&D is somewhere between, depending if it's hardware or software, somewhere between 6 and 20%. And in the cloud business, which we were in, it can be lower because about 30 to 40% of a software company's R&D budget goes into making your software compatible with lots of different platforms. So I think there is a question about how does the state get involved in research and development. I think where we cross the line is where the state tries to start picking winners and losers. I think the state's better off creating an environment where the market can determine what technology is going to be successful. I'm fully in favor of programs, for example, that might give some tax advantage to companies that invest in R&D, but let's let the private sector decide what the projects are.
Yes.
This is along the lines of the scholarships that you're awarding to high school students. And I'm working right now with dual credit. You know what dual credit is, where high school students can take college courses. One of the barriers that we see for low-income students is the cost of that tuition. Even though it's reduced greatly from the MUS system, the Montana University system, there's still an impediment for lower-income students. Would your scholarship fund consider helping those students in any way?
It's a big problem, at least for now. The ACE program, as constituted, is focused on K through 12 and working on trying to increase the graduation rates at that level.
Anything else for Greg? Oh, yes.
Clearly, you're an exceptional individual. You point to what can be done if we had 25 more companies like yours. Do we have the talent pool for people to start them in Montana?
I think we do. I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter. If we have 25 entrepreneurs who decide they're going to do it anyway, they'll find the talent. We recruited from all over the country. We had a world-class career opportunity. It just happened to be in Montana. So talent, when I talk to business leaders across the country, the number one issue in every community is where do you find talent? We used to joke a little bit that when we're interviewing someone, the first question we had to ask was, if we're recruiting somebody from out of state, was, what winter sport do you enjoy? And there was no wrong answer, but you needed an answer to that question. The second question was, what small town did your spouse grow up in? Because there is a cultural issue. We found we had to interview not only for talent and experience, but also for cultural fit. In fact, it turned out that cultural fit was more important than those other two. So money and people will move to find opportunities. We just need to get these sparks started. And the kindling will catch, and then we can have a bonfire, if we want one. Maybe every community may not opt for that, but because I joke sometimes that we moved to Bozeman 20 years ago when it was still part of Montana.
Greg, we have time for one more question,
Okay.
if there is one. Question or comment? Yes, Trish.
I'm wondering if our university system statewide is prepared to graduate 400 computer science folks a year. I'd like to hear that response.
Yeah, well, we've been working. In fact, I met today with the head of the computer science department in the lobby. Royce has been very supportive. Clay Christian's been very supportive. Been working with WADED at Montana State University, John Paxton and Brent Gunnick, the Dean of Engineering there, as well as Don Blackketter at Montana Tech. So there is a dialogue. I would say universally, I've gotten no resistance from anybody. They all recognize that this is a positive direction. There are always logistics and what's the next step. What I've concluded is we don't have enough kids deciding to go into computer science. So the biggest lever I could pull is evangelize the fact that there are great careers in Montana in computer science, create Code Montana. So we have a supply problem right now. So I'm increasing supply, and I trust the academic administration will figure out how to deal with it when they enroll.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. We recognize and greatly appreciate the time Greg has taken to travel with us this year on our Outlook seminars, but what we really appreciated is the time that he's devoting to improving the Montana economy and the well-being of students here. So thanks again, Greg.